Yeah. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's talk by Ms. Saima Zaidi. All attention is focused on the Pakistan elections on Saturday. This talk, I believe, has nothing to do with elections. It's on visual culture and design in Pakistan. You've read her bio, but I'll just briefly go over some of the points. Ms. Zaidi is a communication designer, studied at the National College of Arts in Lahore and at the Pratt Institute in New York. She has been teaching history of design and typography at the Indus Valley School of Art and Architecture in Karachi, which is affiliated to the University of Karachi, or
no, that's
you also teach separately, right? And Ms. Zaidi has researched, edited, and designed a book titled Mazar Bazaar, which is right here if you want to have a look at it after the talk.
Slightly scary.
Yeah, published by OUP Karachi in collaboration with the Prince Claus Fund Library in Amsterdam. Over to you, roughly half an hour or so,
I think so.
and then we can
Open
take
it up.
questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Some more lights.
Yeah, I think we'll, can we let go of a few more lights, please, Jacqueline? Thank you.
No, dim light. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for being here as well. We're going to basically look at this book that came out a couple of years ago, and it was a really, it actually took me 6 years to come to this point. So it was a prolonged process, which I'm going to be sharing with you quite happily. So I don't think I'm going to the next slide somehow. Okay, cool. That's, oh yeah, oh that one, yeah. Just to give you a quick overview of what I mean by visual culture, as well as design, of course. Visual culture in this particular book covered popular material culture, and as well as ancient and contemporary art and architecture. And so we go pre-partition, yes? And then we have design, which is broadly interpreted as communication through image as well as text typography. And this will include graphics, packaging, information design, retail packaging, and then advertising. There were some 33 essays, and they were sort of divided. They all really fell into place, and this book actually really grew. I thought that I was going to finish in 3 months, believe me. So there was something really, really wrong with the idea that I imagined the documentation or research would take a lot shorter period because I'm used to designing books as opposed to editing and putting them all together. So once the sections just started to sort of fall into place, and they were divided roughly into these 5 categories. There was Dekh Magar Pyar Se, which was look but with love, and that was that popular material culture that you see on the street most of the time. Then we've got Read, which was emphasizing typography. Then Be Pakistani, by Pakistani. This was very, consumer culture oriented. And Long Live Pakistan, construction of the graphic identity for a nation. And finally, Pre-Partition Perspective. On the left, you have a seal which is 5,000 years old, and it's called the multiple-headed animal seal. So actually, we look at that also as a visual communication. We don't really sort of stop at something which happened, post 1947, which is a huge date for Pakistanis. Okay. So, since we are in Singapore, we shall first go to the bazaar. Okay. So here you have romance, you've got old world charm, you've got nostalgia, and this is really a very, very iconic talcum powder. And it's very unusually colored aqua green, and in fact that's where I got the color for my book. In fact, the color where I was working, it was just all over the place. Now I don't want to see this color ever again. But this is one of those colors which is very Pakistani. Whenever you go to anywhere, if the mazars, especially the shrines that you see, they are also very much influenced by this color. You see this also in chai khanas, like in tea shops. So it's a very, very, and in fact, I almost feel as if it's one of those colors which has crossed boundaries for South Asia. You go a little, and in fact, all the way to Iran, even Turkey. So I find, maybe it's just me, but I see this color cropping up constantly, even in India for that matter. So anyhow, coming back to this image, you have a sort of a demure woman, lady, looking over her shoulder, and from within this frame of Rangoon creepers as well as chrysanthemums. So, in fact, I think it was your mother, and we were discussing this idea of 1940s, 1950s, and around that time, the family photographs around that time. And it's very evocative of that, whole aesthetics. And anyhow, this was designed in 1951. And Durya actually, who wrote this piece, said something very interesting, that the Tibet lady, she serves as a reminder that in a world of bewildering change, some things reassuringly remain the same. These are the same Tibet talcum powder, but these are the calendar girls. These are the Tibet ladies, so to speak. And on the left, and they're very quintessential images of feminine beauty. The sensuality, as you would want to. I think that's a very good word to use for these women. And the girl on the left, very innocent, very pure. And just gazing off into the distance. I think that is very much in keeping with the notion of how girls, and even now in traditional society, are asked or advised to really avert their eyes from the prying male gaze. And that's very much, again, something that you see in post-revolution Iranian cinema, where you see the actresses were actually told to look not ever to look directly into the the camera. So that's extremely interesting, because that seems to be one of those running themes. And on the right, we see a woman who we will imagine and believe to be a married one. And why would I be saying that? Because she is adorned. She has makeup on. She's got jewelry, and again, it is the married women who are encouraged. Well, this is not really I would say that this is something which is not true anymore, but at that point, say in the 60s, it was the married woman who was encouraged to groom her looks and, look like that. On the left, you've got Hamsa Damayanti. And this is a very, he's a very popular artist, Indian artist, subcontinental, I'd like to say actually, he really came into his own in the turn of the last century, the century before the last actually. And this is the swan as a messenger. It's from the Mahabharata, it's an epic tale in which this swan is relating the qualities of King Nala to Princess Damayanti. So actually the swan here is being a matchmaker. And what you see is, again, this woman lost in thought. Again, that whole image of romance continues. this Raja Ravi Verma was basically, he was taught in the indigenous Tanjore painting, and then he was taught by a European by the name of Theodore Johnson. So therefore you have a major confluence of East and West. And what I found very interesting was, he established an oleographic press, and he mass-produced posters of heroes and heroines, as well as gods and goddesses, which basically went to each and every corner of the subcontinent. Now, what I found very interesting was that I was giving a talk at NID, which is the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad. Actually, it's Gandhinagar. And this was a few years ago. The book hadn't come out yet. And I was just sharing this image because of the fact that this I had come across in Guru Mandir in Karachi on the closet, in a small closet inside one of the Hindu Havelis. Phenomenal. I'm just showing this, and I'm just sort of doing this conjecture sort of thing with the students there, and talking about how this somehow seems to remind me of some kind of Hindu mythology, maybe, no idea. And they just turned around and said, well, you know what, this is Raja Ravi Verma. And I was like, interesting how when you it was such a magical moment for me, because all of a sudden, and for them as well, I think we were sitting there and we realized that there was such shared history. There's such a lot of shared history that we don't even know about. And on the on the right, you actually see Leda and the Swan, which is also the Western legend. So there are lots of confluences going on here. Sorry. These are Pahalwan posters. Pahalwans are wrestlers. And this is a very, very popular sport in especially the Punjab. And this is actually a very famous wrestling match that took place between the Japanese Antonio Inoki and Jhara Pahalwan. So this was very advertised. I mean, I was very, well, honestly, I was very, very young. But I do remember this. And their bodies, as Asim Akhtar, who wrote it, says that they display this very airbrushed, subtle, machismo, like airbrushed suppleness. And you can see, to me, they look like cut and paste. And then you just sort of plastic toys which have been superimposed on that flattish turquoise background. So again, they are really this whole idea, and I find this hysterical that they're such male characters. And if you see the other posters, which are also Pahlawan posters, they actually wear like necklaces upon necklaces upon necklaces. They're like Maharajas. And then even if you look at the trunks, they're very feminine. They've got that whole floral thing going for it. So there's this major contradiction, paradox that comes with their persona that they project. And by the way, their names are compared usually to characteristics of animals. So you have black cobra, white scorpion, and I love this one, intoxicated elephant. I don't want to mess with him. And then there's Bijli Ka Current, which is electric current, and Chamakti Hui Talwar, so a glittering sword. So you sort of get an idea of where they're going. It seems to jump twice. Now here we've got nostalgia again. The one on the left, Nache Nagan Baje Been. That was in the 1960s, and on the right you've got Nazneen, 1980s. And what I find very interesting, and I would like you to focus on the fact that both, despite 20-year gap between the production of both these posters, actually they look very much the same. So there is no technological difference, because obviously they were being painted by hand. More recent poster, I'd like you to, again look at the fact that now we're using the medium of photography, and of course it's photoshopped. This is around 5 years ago, and it has a very, very Hollywood look to it. Also, maybe it's you probably know this. Most of you know this, that our film industry is located in Lahore, and it's called Lollywood, which is obviously a spin-off again of Bollywood from Bombay. Fantastic image. This was done by Aisha Vilani. I forced her to take this photograph while one of her child was in my lap and her husband was taking care of another, and we were standing in Lakshmi Chowk and taking these photographs. It was so hilarious. And then and we got the most beautiful, like she captured a great image. You see the whole contrast in technology happening right there. On the top is the Panaflex, the computerized version. Not of the same film, by the way, but can you see this is Shan? He's a very famous actor, and then you can see him right here. Just the vibrancy, just the emotion. It's so much more out there, over the top, in your face when you're looking at it at a film boarding, a film hoarding, and usually they occupy the whole facade of the cinema. Yeah, so they are either, sometimes they are almost 3 stories high. They're that tall. So you've got melodrama, which is happening on the street, and however, this is very much on the way out. Actually, it's almost redundant, I would say, and because basically the computerized versions are really considered more hip, they're considered more meticulous, more glossy, and more, in fact, multiplex. So yeah. And also, just so you understand, the other version, the hand-painted version, is of course more labor-intensive and expensive. And something which is already and is no longer in existence. These are these are called photography backdrops by the name of Ruh Khinch, which means spirit pulling. So this idea of a photographer pulling the spirit of the one who's being photographed. So you have, these are pretty high, they are at least 6 feet, 7 feet, 7 by 7-ish. And you have this whole pastiche of different kinds of architecture happening with this very theatrical, theater-type curtain bordering it. And of course, on the right, you've got the person who is photographed in front of it. So what the photographer's really letting you do is kind of escape. And it's a world of fantasy, really. And also, the photography backdrop is really an invitation on the street. And can you imagine when this used to take place on the street? It's really like a theater that's being enacted for you. So almost a performance, so to speak. I really love this. This is basically the concept of artist's intervention in public space. It's a miniature. It's from 1595, and it's from the Khamsa of Nizami. And anyhow, coming back to the story, this is when Alexander the Great, Iskandar, and his whole army, and this is 23 centuries back. This is 23 centuries old, this event that was probably happened, and this is Iskandar with his whole army ending up in the desert of Kipchak. And guess what? They came across these exceptionally beautiful women, and they were actually described as the sun and the moon and the stars, so they're really stunning. And Alexander the Great has a problem on his hands. So he goes to the village elders and he asks them that, listen, please, would you ask your women to veil their face? And the elders retorted, well, the veil should be on the eyes of the soldiers. Fair enough, but that doesn't solve Alexander's problem. So he goes back, he speaks to his magician who was Bilbas, and they both come up with this idea that, well, let's place a statue carved in black marble with a bride who has her face with a veil on it. And lo and behold, it does have the effect that was desired. The women involuntarily started to cover their face. And this is really a huge example of the power of the visual. And actually, I would say that this is really a precedent to what you see around in the cities today, the billboards. The billboards where you have that gorgeous woman selling anything from, furniture to fabric. And they are actually referred to as Mechanical Brides by McLuhan. Another of my favorite images, and again, exceptional example of multiculturalism. This is when the legendary romance between Khusro and Shireen. This is actually the Shireen Farhad story. Farhad was the third person in the trilogy. No, what do you call it? Love triangle. Yeah. And Shireen, they're meeting, of course, for the first time here. And Shireen, right here, she is supposed to be an Eastern European princess and presumed to be Christian. And you have Khusro, who is a Persian prince, probably Zoroastrian. And this epic is immortalized by the Persian poet Nizami, who is ethnically Turkish. So this particular miniature was painted in by actually Iranians as well as Indians. So you've got both Hindus and Muslims coming together to produce this work of art. And it was done in the Qutub Khana of Emperor Akbar. So that was in Lahore Fort, right? So again, a brilliant example of creativity brought together by heterogeneous people, countries, cultures, religions. Also, I would like to take a little bit. I find this very interesting because none of these miniatures were ever really painted by one person. It wasn't as if it was just this one painter who was painting them. There were people. This is not a miniature. For example, this border, the hashia, which was a hugely important design element in the miniature, would be something that was something a particular artist would perfect. Huh? And then you have here what you're really looking at is again a collaboration between the writer and the artist, the calligrapher, and Abdul Rahim, who is the scribe of the manuscript, and the artist on the right. So it's a celebration of not only painting but also calligraphy. And I really like it because Rumi once, as a tribute to these illuminated manuscripts, said something about how an ant accidentally fell on the page of an illuminated manuscript and discovered that he was in a garden of bliss. Another image of text and image coming together. This is the newspaper called Jung, which is war, and this is when more is more. Basically, you have several design elements coming together here, and can I get away from the mic? It's important for me to stick to the mic.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm stuck. So here we are. We are looking at this page, which the whole idea is to create a sense of urgency. It is a newspaper, right? And you can even maybe refer to it as organized chaos. So what are you looking at here? You're looking at the script, which is Nastaliq, which is 90% of the time that you see Urdu, it's being written in the cursive fluid form, which is the Nastaliq. And then you've got textual hierarchy, which is being established by the font size variation. So the more important something is the larger it is, obviously. And then you've got articles which are in self-contained units. So this is a self-contained unit, that's a self-contained unit. And what's happening is that there is a heading and then there are subheadings. And the text is uniform throughout, it is consistent in size, and it is justified. And what really that achieves is a very uniform grey texture across the page. So what you really end up seeing is grey texture and these black, subheadings just zigzagging through the whole thing. And this is the standard design that you see for Urdu newspapers across the board. And this was done by Asim Sajjad Akhtar. I think he was here just last week. He's the one who wrote it. And this is a great example of when text is a visual, to be read as a visual. It's not meant to be read. In fact, Jamal Ilyas, he's a professor at UPenn, and he's the one who wrote this. And I love the way he titled this essay. He called it "Not Reading the Writing on the Wall." And he's basically talking about epigraphy, which is calligraphy placed on architecture, and how it was a signifier for that space. So it meant that this was supposed to be probably a sacred building, but it wasn't meant to be read. And why can he say that? Because one, the text was very ornate, and also because most of the time it was very high, so you can't really read it. And this is a beautiful example. It's actually not Pakistan, it's Turkey. This is a seminary which became a museum. And also, by the way, you see this even now these days, how people write these mashallah or stuff like that, or even for that matter, whole verses of Quran on their houses. Because they act as talismans. There is that whole concept going there. And more ornamentation. This is what they call the bride on the streets of Karachi. This is W11. Okay, you do not mess with W11. It's this. I have actually sat in this. It's so psychedelic, it's a real trip, basically. So what you're doing is, there's music blaring, please understand, there is all kinds of colors, yellow, red, blue, green, all blinking off, it's all crazy. And then, on top of that, you've got hot pink and turquoise recliners. So you've basically got a nightclub, mobile light nightclub. And I'd like you to draw your attention to the Taj, or the, the crown of both the W11 as well as the truck. These are common. This is not something specific. This is not something that is an aberration. This is very common sight in Pakistan, and basically the truck drivers and the mini bus drivers, they become kings of the road, as they like to refer to themselves. And in fact, again, I was talking about this the other day, and how, I recognize that every day you read the newspaper, you open it up, and one absurdity has, taken over the last one. So you don't really imagine Pakistan to be this place which might just end up having a sense of humor. But it does. When you're in Karachi and it's hot and you're bothered and you're stuck in a traffic jam. And what do you see in front of you? A rickshaw, which is a tuk-tuk. And what will they have on it? And you'll actually, you'll just burst out laughing, because they'll be like, "Wo kaun thi?" And you'll be like, "Who was she?" You're just like, what? And then there will be Professor. Now that's very, and the last one I saw, and I was like, oh my god, I would never want to sit in this one again, ever, because it was like Aakhri Sawari. It was like the last journey. So anyhow, I mean, this is what you see on the road on an everyday basis. And that's what I think basically keeps us sane. This is a juxtaposition of images from the truck as well as the new miniature painting. That's Aisha Khalid on the right. What I really wanted to bring to what is more exciting to me is not these both genres separately, but actually when they juxtaposed against each other, you realize that because of the fact that we all live in the same environment, the iconography or the symbolism that you see in either miniature painting or for that matter on the trucks is actually pretty much the same. You have roses, you've got landscapes, you've got cypresses, eagles, animal world. Those are the main things that are recurrent. They're constantly coming in the imagery. Here, of course, I'm specifically talking about roses. So it's a democratization of art, I would say. Ataullah Isa Khan Khelvi, popular folk musician, and surrounded again by, this is the back of a truck, just in case you thought it was anything else, okay? It's gigantic. You've got images of angels and landscapes, again, flowers, birds. Yeah, and these images are occurring in pairs. So what you really see is an overall symmetry in design, which is also a very Islamic concept, by the way. Also, please note these magical heavenly winged angels. And there's a reason why I'm particularly the Buraq. Now we move on to another heavenly steed with wings, and this is the Buraq, which is Prophet Muhammad's the heavenly steed which made him do the spiritual ascent, which we refer to as the night journey. And this journey, it signifies discovery and knowledge. Now that may be physical, they may be spatial, it might be psychological. So to journey is to basically leave behind the familiar and the known. And one cannot know oneself without knowing difference. That's the primary concept behind any journey that we undertake. It's all about encountering the other and about self-knowledge. This is linked, of course, to the quest of the hero, a universally recurring theme. And as you may know, Socrates, know thyself. That's also what we're really talking about. And in fact, Prophet Muhammad himself, one of his very famous hadiths is that seek knowledge even if you have to go to China. So I think that's what we all, I mean, most of us here are not from Singapore, I would imagine. So I think that's what's happening in Singapore. I think I've not been here for too long really, but I think what's happening is it's a melting pot and you're all encountering differences and learning about yourself and also in fact integrating, which is beautiful. Another of my heroes, real heroes, Jhulelal. He's the patron saint of travelers, and in fact I discovered him through another friend of mine who is also a graphic designer, Sohail Zaberi, who actually told me that if you have him in the book, then this book will come to an end quicker. And I fell for it. Anyhow, but actually you don't really see him. If I were to, normal people wouldn't know that he's Jhulelal because we usually see him written in Urdu as a text. It's in red